Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is Ryan Staley, your host, and I have Kurt Daniel on. Kurt is a software and SaaS executive with experience at Microsoft, Parallels, Worklight, which was acquired by IBM, and MongoDB. He helped build, lead, and scale 3 startups now worth $35 billion. Not with an M, with a B, billion. He's currently the CEO at Ubersmith, which is a growing and profitable provider of subscription management for the cloud, including turnkey subscription building, monitoring, ticketing, and more. He's also an independent board member and advisor with experience at CodeClimate, Ivex, Klug, which was acquired by Facebook, Lightyear, QuickSave, Rainsphere, Wonderflow, and others. Kurt, happy to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Ryan.
Yeah. There's so many things that we're going to dig into today. You have obviously an amazing experience in terms of all the areas that you've dug into in terms of the startup world. So can you share with everyone your superhero origin story, just to give a little more depth to the intro I provided?
Superhero origin story. Interesting. I hope I can handle this one. Well, I don't know. I'm a twin brother, starting very young, and then from there, I got into business early, did some kind of hustling in middle school and high school in terms of odd jobs around the neighborhood, that kind of thing, and then working for others, and then went into consulting after college, where I studied economics and other things. And then from consulting, I decided to focus on tech. So made a great decision over 20 years ago to focus on tech very early on in my career. Went to Microsoft first. And just really appreciated the history, the mentorship, the thoughtfulness in terms of long-term planning with products and packaging and pricing and partnerships and business models and that kind of thing. And then took that after 4 great years of learning to take a risk and do 3 different startups in a row, where I joined after the founders started the company. But fairly early on in each case. And so all 3 of those we made successful. One almost failed, and that was a lot of work, but helped them find product market fit even after they had raised a lot of money. And then the other 2 were one was more of just a pure kind of growth and scale up story where they had some product market fit. And then the other one was a true rocket ship. That was MongoDB, which was called 10gen at the time. And so really 3 different experiences, super grateful to have even just one startup experience. I think everyone should have at least one startup experience in their career, even if it's brief or as an advisor, for example. And then from there, I joined what was more of a bootstrap company in my first CEO role, and that was Ubersmith 7 years ago. And I really helped grow and scale the company and do so many new things and make it highly profitable and much bigger, and then leading to earlier this year actually successfully selling the company and getting the second exit actually for the company. This is the second time we've actually been sold, and so that was super exciting. And then everything else I've been involved in has been fun. It's been hard work, but a lot of challenges. The SaaS market is competitive and global, and but it's exciting and super rewarding as well, and just great to talk to you and share some of those experiences.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I mean, that's an amazing background, and there's so many different areas we could dig in. So, to start off, I guess, and I'm gonna, this is totally unscripted. I'm going off script, man. But based on your unique background, I think, what would you say is the single most important thing when trying to go from 0 to 1 million in revenue?
0 to 1 million. Yeah, it's. I mean, the team is pretty small typically, so it's a small team. You need to kind of trust each other, and you're working hard, and you hopefully have identified the customer pain, and you have some sort of solution, whether it's an MVP, and a plus or minus. And so it's really you're in the trenches, and unless you get lucky, which occasionally happens, but you can't count on. It's usually hard work, and there's uncertainty, and there's some risk, and it's just really just innovating, focusing on the customers, and if you don't have something that's a hit right away, finding it as quickly as possible, or turning, or kind of switching a little bit, or even doing like a big pivot, like Slack did, or others, which are famous for. Even Mongo had to do a pivot where they were building all this stuff, but then they decided to just focus on the database where customers were really interested in that one piece primarily. Worklight, we did multiple pivots. So yeah, I'd say if it's one word, it's probably going to be a pivot unless you get lucky. But hopefully you get lucky. Yeah, it's a very exciting time, but it can be extremely difficult. And I've been involved with obviously multiple companies that have gone through that, and it's different every single time. So it's unpredictable. It's different. Get help from other people, and don't try to do it all by yourself or in your own head, especially with your team. Be very kind of open with them and share the challenges, and they'll hopefully help you as the founder or CEO get there faster.
Okay. I think that's great advice in terms of transparency, and then in terms of adapting until you kind of hit that sweet spot, right? So I love that. What's the biggest mistake you see founders make at that stage?
So many. The biggest one I've personally seen that's been the most painful is they build way too much. So they just try to build way too much. I saw a startup recently that wanted to build like 4 or 5 applications and a platform.
Wow.
Usually you're supposed to build an application and then you build a platform later. But they want to build the platform and the application and actually these other applications. I'm like, you really need to pick one. I don't care which one it is. Your customers probably do, so you should ask them, but validate it. But yeah, that's the biggest thing I see. The other one is just not having a good kind of maybe go to market idea just early on. So it's about the 0 to 1 million and before. It's about the MVP and the customer pain and the solution, but it's also about finding people to actually talk to about that to then get that adoption. So some founders are really natural about this. They already know dozens of startup friends who are already willing to kind of give feedback, sign up for the MVP and the early list and that kind of thing. And those startups tend to do pretty well. And so, yeah, really thinking about that go to market really early on is, I think, something that's missed a lot as well. But I would say the biggest thing is building too much, and then you run out of money, or you build too much of the wrong thing, and you run out of money because it's too expensive to switch, and your investors, they don't trust you anymore because you tried to go build something too big, and then not listening. Like someone says you're building too much, they don't listen, they build it anyways, and it's not fun to say I told you so, especially when you're a stockholder, stock option holder. Or an investor in the company, or they're for your friends, and you just want them to be successful.
Well, how many startups have you advised?
Dozens. So formally and informally. Formally, probably around a dozen as a board member advisor, and then another dozen or so informally, and then another few dozen people just will reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn or through a connection and ask me to review pitch decks, which I probably shouldn't say this, but I quite enjoy looking at, even if there's no real benefit for me. I just enjoy looking at it, and I've seen so many, and I've helped, MongoDB and every other company I've worked at either, raise money or sell the company. And so having a strong marketing background and strategy background, I love the overall story and how to make it look and how to be specific and how to tell a great story, but don't stretch the truth too far and that kind of stuff. So I love just looking at these pitch decks and that kind of thing as well.
Okay, so that's a massive amount of experiences that you've had. So what would you say, and I know this is a totally loaded question, so don't slap me, Kurt, all right? But what would you think, what do you think is the best go-to-market strategy? Is it sales? Is it product-led, sales-led? Is it marketing-led?
That's a great question. I think it maybe depends on the space you're in. And it depends on your team, who you have on your team, although you can, if you decide your strategy is different, you can obviously hire people who are better at one or the other. My personal choice, which is actually kind of the market's kind of has been moving this way, which is kind of convenient and nice for me. But I personally like product and marketing led, and I don't see people really talk about it that way. So obviously there's product led growth, and even I feel a little bit weird when I say that, but it's just helpful because other people say it that way. But I'm not trying to use overused words, but it's maybe starting to become overused. But product led growth, and then I like marketing led growth. And then obviously there's sales-led growth as well, but I like starting with product and the pricing, which is part of the product, and then the go-to-market, the marketing, like how are you actually going to get the word out there from a bottoms-up kind of freemium or open source strategy, if that's appropriate, or content or whatever it is. But I like product and marketing led. If I'm allowed to choose two, if I'm allowed to only choose one, I'll take product led growth, and we'll build around that because that's what you're starting with in terms of customer pain and customer solution. But if you allow it, Ryan, this one time at least, I would like product and marketing led, and then everybody else at the company supports growth. Everyone, the support reps who are getting feedback from customers or prospects who can help us improve the solution, super fast because we listened and we cared and we put the work in to get it to the right person at the company, who can act on that super important feedback or insight. So yeah, it's a product and marketing led growth, but the whole company being part of it and not just the only focus being on product or marketing.
And no, I think that's great feedback. And so I guess my question is like, why, and what dollar amounts do you think that those fit best in? Because there's a lot of debate right now on this. So I'd love to hear your take because I mean I've seen it work in all different scenarios. So
I tend to like products that are kind of bottoms up that any size organization can use anywhere in the world. I think I got spoiled early on at Microsoft where we had just all these customers like consumers, small business, medium business, large business, government, nonprofit, education. Basically, I'm sure Microsoft software is used in every country in the world, legally or not. But basically got spoiled with that, and so I would be disappointed if I just worked at a company that just sold to extremely large enterprises, for example, or just to large governments or just to large telcos or that kind of thing. So I like this kind of bottoms up, and that means you need a product that's very usable and it just works. So you turn it on, it works. You don't need professional services or extensive training. Just to for our software, it's billing software. Just to send your first invoice should be out of the box, bottoms up. Ideally with a freemium model, if you can figure out how to limit it, which is it's not rocket science. Start limiting it. I would say pretty limited, make it pretty limited, and then you can obviously make it more generous. But if you make it really generous and then take away, people may not trust you. So that's what I would say in terms of, I like this kind of bottoms up. But other companies, there's a lot of good account-based marketing going on with large companies, and there's some really good sales, kind of sales-led growth you can do with large companies, and I'm sure other size companies as well. That's not my area of expertise. Really specializing on sales for the very largest companies, say with 10,000 or more employees. But there are other people who are really great at that. And so, the different types of companies need different things. And but I like ones where you start with any size company, kind of like a Salesforce early on, or a Slack. It can be used by any size company, but they also have these enormous accounts as well.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm more that. I mean, that's more my specialty: sales, go to market. Mm-hmm. And so I always love hearing all different sides of it because I know there's nuances to everyone, top down, bottom up. Absolutely. So that's great perspective. So okay, so now we're at $1 million in revenue. Okay, what's the best path? Or I should say, let me ask you this: what's the biggest mistake that you see founders making or startups making when they want to go from 1 to 10 million?
1 to 10, okay. It's sometimes they launch a second product too early on. So, I mean, ideally, you can take your first product and get to not just 1, but maybe 10 and maybe 100 million, maybe even, you want to think really big, to $1 billion in revenue. But, that doesn't always work. If you're serving more of a niche market, you might want to offer them a kind of a collection of 2 or 3 products that are nicely integrated. There's some good success stories for this. That helps, I think, particularly well with small business. If you're maybe only focused on small business, so that's what I would say there.
Okay, and what would you define as too early then? Like when someone adds a new product, what would you define as too early, or what's kind of that point?
I think it depends, but it might be too early if you're in the single-digit millions, but it might not be. It really depends.
Okay, so and
some of it is there's so many different mistakes I see. Like one is just not forecasting sales rep productivity. So you have your first million in sales or whatever, and maybe a lot of the founder CEO has been doing it or co-founder, and then you're like, okay, this is great. We just raised seed round or even maybe a Series A, and you go and you hire like 5 reps, and you assume they're all going to be selling what the CEO or co-founder sold, but they don't have the training, they don't have like the full kind of maybe skill set, so yeah, I see that like forecasting rep productivity, and not all the reps are going to work out, so some basic kind of forecasting, and yeah, it can be a little bumpy, right? And almost every company has a bad quarter. Even the best companies will have like a bad quarter, and so just preparing for the worst, but working for the best, I say.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's ramp time. Have you seen David Skock's work at all? He's a board member for HubSpot.
I think yeah, I've seen some of it. Yeah.
He did a piece on it where he talks about kind of like the founder's journey, and like he breaks it down simply. It's like the biggest mistakes they made is like, first of all, can the founder sell it? And once the founder can sell it, can the founder plus one person sell it? Can that one person sell it, right? And then can a team sell it? And he's like, most people just try and skip steps. So they'll go from founder to that group, and then they'll have massive overhead and ramp, and they won't account for it. And they'll be years behind where they should have been if they just kind of incrementally did it. And I see that too. I mean, most of the time, like, you could just do things intuitively if you built the product, you've been so ingrained in the business, but you don't have playbooks, you don't have exact like sequences or follow-ups that you need to do to systemize kind of that algorithm that's inside the founder's head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lot easier if you have clear product market fit and you have inbound demand, right? And I've worked with companies, it's both ways. So like a company that has almost no product market fit or demand, that is extremely hard. It can be excruciating. And some of those companies, fail. It's natural. Like you're taking risk, and startups are risky, and some are going to fail. It's natural. But then I've worked at ones that have it's almost like you're flooded with demand. And then in between where you have like a decent product. And so it comes in all forms for sure.
So what do you think? I mean, what's the key differentiation point between those that are flooded with demand versus those that aren't? I mean, is it, and I know a part of it is like the problem you're solving, right? I mean, that's a huge piece of it.
The problem, it's the usability, it's the approachability of like the business model. So there's usually like, I think when you're flooded, there's at least a free trial, if not like a free, full offering you can use on an ongoing basis, whether that's open source or not. And then, so you can get started for free basically. And then even getting like community support or office hours or whatever's appropriate. Those are kind of more for the geeky companies, maybe in the open source world. But also just the information, like the usability just to get started with it. And then if it's a more complicated product, just having like nice kind of documentation or other types of resources, videos, etc. To make it really clear. And then, usually they're pretty focused products. So Slack, you do messaging extremely well, or Zoom, you can do video better than anybody else. And then, let's see, or the database, like with Mongo, is very focused. It's a database. It wasn't, again, that thing they started with, which was a whole hosted kind of platform, if you will. So focused, and then ideally, it's way better. It's so much better. Like Zoom was so much better than WebEx or the other offerings. Slack was so much better, still way better than Teams. Even now, it's with all the Microsoft's resources. So it's ideally just so much better. Mongo is so much easier to work with, and set up scalability and availability with, in addition to the core kind of data model. It's usually unique and very focused and very inexpensive and very easy to get started with.
Unique, very focused, very inexpensive, and then easy to start, low barrier to entry, right? Okay, I think that's a great kind of framework to follow if you're developing a product, especially if you're going from that bottoms up approach. So Kurt, I guess like shifting gears a little bit, what would you say is like your number one or top couple ninja skills that you have that you're potentially best in the world at?
Best in the world. I would say positioning is one. So I've been doing sort of positioning. I mean, you position yourself when you apply to college, go to grad school. You're positioning when you're writing those essays or filling out your application. Positioning yourself when you're interviewing for different jobs, which I've done many times, like I'm sure you have and others. And then I've been lucky at a company to where I can, at a product level, marketing level, or run a sales team as well, or at the company level now as a CEO, positioning the company, positioning the products and services. So just I'd say positioning in general, making it specific but credible, backing it up, telling a great story, but again, don't take it too far, and keep your ethics in place. I'd say positioning, particularly for B2B SaaS products, but really technology in general, and perhaps other types of companies as well. But there's enough tech companies to help. I haven't really had to go elsewhere. Team building, I'm not going to say I'm the best of the world. I'm sure I'm not. But I'd say team building is a critical skill, just as people who want to be or already are a manager or executive or someone who's running the company. The team is everything. The team helps you build the products and start the company and grow the business and serve the customers. And so that's one I like to get as good as I can at. But positioning, I'm sure I stack a little bit higher, but I also won't say I'm the best in the world at positioning. But maybe if positioning B2B subscription products for certain types of companies like data centers and cloud companies, maybe I am the best of the world, but I won't get ahead of myself for sure. Thanks.
Well, and I know that's a hard question to say you're best in the world at something. So I'm not going to hold you to that, man. I'm not going to put it out there. But what I would say is
I'm just shoot for it. Thanks.
But so what's your mental model when you finish that on the end, like B2B SaaS subscription, how do you approach it? And how do you accelerate growth when you're looking at a company you're advising, or you're the CEO of the company? How do you approach that?
Well, I think you have to kind of look internally. You have to look externally. So you're looking at the market. You're looking at the other companies you're competing with, or they're competing with. You have to know the product pretty well. Sometimes people get into trouble by just not knowing the product really well, or the competition really well, and it's kind of like you're just kind of guessing, or you're kind of blindfolded, and you might come up with something that sounds really nice, but it won't hit when you go out to the market in terms of being kind of unique, memorable, and incredible. And you see, I remember, I don't see as much now, but I used to see a while back, like you'd see like 3 companies or 5 companies in one market would all claim they're the leader. And that's impossible, because it wasn't qualified. It wasn't like we're the leader for small business for databases or virtualization or whatever, or we're the leader, for this type of database or something. Sometimes you would just see they're the leader, and you're like, okay, I know 2 of these people are lying, because there's no 3-way ties in a market like that. So yeah, I used to see that. I don't see that as much anymore, but yeah, just making it credible and, working through the team with it, testing it with customers, testing it with the sales team versus the marketing team versus the product team. So as a CEO, I can just get everyone in my weekly call or a different kind of, offsite or something, and just, really test it, put it through its paces, and not doing it in isolation. I've worked at companies where it's just the CEO just does it, or just marketing does it, or the CEO with marketing. But I like to do it with everyone. Head of product, head of technology, head of sales, and it doesn't necessarily always change, but that you've kind of tested through different angles, and they've all talked to different customers. They have different kind of feedback, or some know certain competitors better than others. So yeah, I'd say looking outside, looking internally, asking a lot of people, and then just putting in the effort. Like it's whether you're doing your own college application or a resume later in life, you just put in like a little extra effort. It can be the difference, right? It's like a professional athlete. A little bit better, it could mean you make 10 times as much money. You can't all be professional athletes, but some of the entrepreneurs in technology obviously do quite well. Actually, even better. If you look at the world's wealthiest people, right? Yeah, I'd say just put in the effort, and getting help as well. Like maybe you can yourself, if you just keep spending a little more time, a little more effort, you might be able to make it really awesome. But some people clearly need the help. So just having people kind of look at it, especially if it's something important like your company elevator pitch or your mission or your vision. Those are things you should, if you don't spend a lot of time on, you hopefully get lucky and create something really good. But otherwise, you might be you might not be, doing the optimal thing.
All right, so that's a writer downer. It's a writer downer, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot in there, but what I took, the key takeaways are, like you're saying, testing it across the three core areas of your business, right? That's sales, marketing, and the product side in terms of messaging and what people respond to and positioning. I think that's awesome because I mean, sales one-on-one is totally different than one-to-many. There is overlap, but and then product, same thing too. You get a lot of times when someone's your customer, they'll give you like, all right, this is what I really think feedback, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, that's so true. Yeah, whether it's like a virtual Zoom call for sales now, or I used to love going to these. I mean, probably I'll go again, but not as much. But these physical events where you could prospects and customers kind of test different ways of positioning, and then you can kind of bring that back. And sometimes the customers bring words you haven't even thought of that are like,
Oh,
wow,
totally.
that's really a great word to use for this. Yeah.
Well, and here's the great question that unearthed so many areas that I didn't even know of, like when I was leading the team. But after a customer bought, and you're in the middle of it, not usually like the implementation meeting, but you're a little bit past that, right? And you're past the I guess you're still in the honeymoon stage or whatever of the relationship, but you're just kind of like, hey, so what's the real reason why you guys bought from us?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're like, well, the ROI was 3 times what you put up there, or like basically this helped our inventory.
Don't raise your prices. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like you'll get the like almost like if you ask someone when they were drunk what the real reason is, they'll just tell you. It's kind of like that, right? So, anyways, and then you're one of the few people that I really heard identify, and I've interviewed a lot of founders about focusing on the vision and the mission and testing that. Most folks don't do that. So I think that's a really critical call out there. So I think those are, really, really great areas to focus on if you're building a business. So.
Agreed. I think it's good for the team, obviously. So it's nice to work at a company that actually has a vision, and they took the time to write down the vision and the mission. And this might be literally an hour of work when you're really early on, or it might even be faster. You can write it on a napkin at a restaurant. I think it's important not only for the internal team to know that you work at a company that has a mission and a vision and values, but also I think I don't know if I can prove this, but I think your customers and your partners and everyone else that touches your company and solutions, I think they'll appreciate that you have put this down as well.
Love that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you this question because you come from a place of experience. Why are founders obsessed with getting funding or selling their company?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, some people do seem to be overly obsessed with it. I mean, it's an important activity, and it typically requires a lot of work. And so you want to put in the right amount of work, but you don't want to only focus on that. Kind of like the companies that focus too much on parties early on before you even have product market fit. That I think happens less, especially during the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, that was more famous during the .com boom and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's important, but you don't want to focus too much on it. Selling your company, I mean, when you're ready to sell your company and you have something of value to sell, then you can, I don't know if you want to be obsessed with it, but you want to put in the right thoughtfulness in it, have a good approach, make sure you're working with the right people. Like I highly recommend having a banker, and a great one, and just kind of do it. Again, I wouldn't obsess with it, but I might obsess with how you do like a meeting with a potential buyer to make sure you've kind of researched everyone, that kind of thing, like a healthy obsession. But just an obsession in terms of the process or the goal, especially when you're not ready for that goal. Some companies are obsessing over like financing when they just raise money or something, and they really should be focused on just getting that next step of progress down. So yeah, I don't know. I don't love the obsession word. But I'm sure it's out there, and I think you need to switch gears, obviously, when you're starting and growing a company, but you also need to have some balance as well.
Yeah. No, and where the word obsessed comes from is it's like pounded in the press. And then on top of it, there's a lot of early stage founders that I've spoken to that, I'm like, what's your number one priority? And they're like, getting funding. And I'm like, well, that's good. But like, have you created a business where you can actually sell what you have first or create revenue without needing that? So it's almost looked at as kind of like the pill that'll make you lose 20 pounds in like a week,
Totally.
versus like something to augment the speed of what you already have,
Yeah, I
So
think it's something necessary you need to do, and at certain points of time, you do need to be that needs to be your number one activity if you're going through the fundraising process or whatever, or the round raising process. But yeah, obsessing over it too much, too early on, or at the wrong time, I agree.
well, and I mean, this is timely because I know you just helped sell Ubersmith, right? And so, what was your number one learning experience from going through that process?
Um, you're very good at making us focus the answer. That's great. I would say I'd say number one thing might have been just the trust with the potential buyer. So we had a lot of buyers kind of play games, like smaller private equity firms. You have to be really careful. They'll put in a bid, and then a few weeks later, after they get their kind of like exclusivity clause with you to like focus on working through that bid, they'll say, "Oh, we don't like your TAM," or "We don't like this other thing," and we're like, "Are you sure you don't like our TAM? We create billing software, which is super critical, and any company on the planet can use it of any size. And we have all these like specific, by the way, features for billing that no one else has. And you're calling that TAM too small. And the billing is one of the largest markets in the world for software. So is this
Right.
really the conversation we're having right? Is this really why you want to drop your price by 30% or 50% 2 weeks later? You sure it's not due to some other reason?" And so, yeah, there's a lot of game playing. So if you're selling a small company, if you're selling like Slack or something, you're not going to have the games. I think it's more about finding the right home for the business and the right long-term kind of shared roadmap, and then the right price and terms and everything. There's a smaller company, which is what probably most companies are when they try to go sell, because there's more small companies than large companies, obviously, and medium companies. Is just to know who you're talking to, and hopefully the bankers can help you, but in our case, I mean, the bankers were extremely helpful, but it's very hard even for them to predict who's legit, who might play games, and whatever. So just going in, just being prepared for people to kind of play games. And we ended up going with somebody who we just really trusted, had a great track record of acquiring a lot of companies. They've actually acquired over 500.
Wow.
So just a tremendous track record over decades. Versus some of these other firms, they maybe a year or two old. They say they have a fund, or they say they have the money, but then you talk to them and they're like, "Oh, we're not going to have a problem getting money for this." I'm like, "Wait, I thought you had a fund, but you had the money." No, they're going to actually go out and like scrounge for this investment. And the investors, maybe they want something else. They don't want billing. They want B2C or something. So yeah, just trust and just being honest with yourself, who you're talking to, and that kind of thing, and trying to, if they have concerns, uncover those before you sign those indication of interest documents or the LOIs, that kind of thing.
Excellent. Well, that's excellent advice, and we're up on time now, Kurt. So, love the insight that you dropped during this episode. Where can people find you? Where can they find out more about you, about Ubersmith, and kind of what you're doing right now?
Sure. I'm on Twitter, so it's Kurt O. Daniel, KurtODaniel, and our website is ubersmith.com, and in other places as well. But those are the two best ones, and love to meet new people, follow new people, and get exposure to their ideas as well. So thanks for asking.
Excellent. Yeah, man. It was a pleasure having you on the show. I just love your depth of experience across a lot of different areas. Brought some really amazing insights to the show. So thank you for being on, man. It was a pleasure getting a chance to chop it up with you.
Thanks, Ryan. Loved it, and have a great day.